Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to an instant reaction edition of the Tip Sheet podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, joining me to break down a pretty tough and I got to say surprisingly heartbreaking round 15 loss to the Sydney Roosters. My good mate, 60s, big fella, down 16-0. It felt like we're on our way to a big old blowout with the Tricolours running away with it, and then the Eels dug in very deep to reclaim the lead 18-16. Only to see it squirreled away. I wouldn't say one-to-one analogous to what we saw with Canterbury last week, but that last quarter coming a little bit unstuck again.
Mate, I'm going to have to throw to a cliche here. It's the hope that kills you.
Yes.
In all honesty, that first, the early part of the game, and when the Roosters raced out to a 16-0 lead, and to be succinct, we were awful in that period of time. I was sitting there thinking, we are heading for a 40 to 50 point thrashing here, and I was actually contemplating leaving early because it wasn't just that. It wasn't the scoreline, it was the manner in which we were playing in that early part of the game. It was just it was just a dog's breakfast. We didn't look like a team. We looked clueless, absolutely clueless. And then Junior comes on and starts to ignite some attacking football from us. And anyway, we'll get into that in a moment. Just as we start off, we had our pre-match podcast with Michael Buettner at Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, earlier tonight. So our thanks, first of all, to Para Leagues for having us there in the bistro every week of the Eels season. For home games anyway. And all those people that came out to see us, we really appreciate the support. And special mention to Todd and Rebecca, who took the time to chat with us after the podcast. They were big fans of Michael Buettner, but also had a photo taken with us, and we will post that up there. So a shout out to Todd and Rebecca. And we're looking to do something around the Disability Rugby League for them in an upcoming podcast. So stay tuned for that. We do have the podcast with Michael Buettner that will be tacking on at the end of this instant reaction podcast. So stick around with that, because it is certainly very enlightening having a talk to Mick Buettner about aspects of backline play and whether the Eels are doing the sorts of things that he was talking about tonight. I guess we'll leave you to be the judge of that. And, of course, shout out as well to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, for always being there for us, supporting us almost since the beginning of the Cumberland Throw. Greg and the team there, it literally does make what we do possible, their support. So, mate, yes, back into the game tonight. As I was saying, it seemed that we got that real momentum shift when Junior came onto the field. That the pass that he put on for Reg to burst downfield, and then the acceleration of Mitch Moses to fly up in support and then burst away from the cover defence. That was certainly a highlight of the night. It's not that we didn't leave in the end some tries out there in that first half. Blaze Talangi was stripped of the ball as he was in the act of scoring a try. We had Sean Russell, who couldn't manage to ground the ball when he was diving into the corner on the other side of
that
the
was
field.
a bad miss, that one.
Yeah, so people will probably want to be commenting on that, on those missed opportunities. But, there was certainly some really bright attacking football towards the end of the first half, and then probably up to about the 20-minute mark in the second half, the Eels showing what they're capable of in attack, but once again, just can't get the job done. I think we've really forgotten how to win, and it's becoming obvious that once we hit that midway point in the second half, that the performance really drops off, and unfortunately, that was the case tonight.
Yeah, Taylor Tape says Sydney Roosters prevailing 28 to the Parramatta Eels 18. Tries the blue and gold. Mitchell Moses, you mentioned that one, backing up the two bookends. Dylan Brown for sizzling individual effort in the 41st minute, with Blaze Talangi icing off a crisp right edge backline movement. Moses 2 from 3 off the tee in terms of try conversions, also tacking on a penalty goal for the Tricolours. Junior Ponga opening up the scoring in the 4th minute. Michael Jennings, and then a double for Daniel Tupou. Angus Crichton sealing the game in the 75th minute. Sam Walker 4 from 5 off the tee. Both teams have a player in the sin bin. Kelma Tuolangi for a dangerous throw on Lindsay Collins, I believe it was, and he'll probably have to face a charge from the match review committee on the back of that. And then no surprises, Jared Warrior-Hargraves in the sin bin for a pretty nasty high shot on Sean Lane, and that was in the 32nd minute. Eels capitalising on that, scoring 2 tries. In terms of stats, it's a little bit discombobulated, 60s, because NRL.com have broken their API, it looks like. There is no numbers here for team stats or player stats, and so to Fox Sports we go. And I don't know if Fox are just on the conservative side of measuring stats, but they tend to, well, based on what we've seen other games, they tend to have things a little bit lower here. Eels slightly ahead on run meters by about plus 100, 14.42 to 13.42 for the Roosters. But the Roosters breaking 8 more tackles and making 4 more line breaks. So they're ahead in some key offensive stats there. Eels plus 11 on the offloads, 21 to 10. Completing 30 of their 38 sets to 29 and 37 for the Roosters. So very similar completion rates across both teams. Eels had almost double the Roosters tackled in opposition 20 as a stat there. So a lot of attacking opportunities, but got a bit stilted in that second half. Once they got the lead, they couldn't make it any further there on an 18-16 game state. And then we go to the individual play stats here, 60s. Quiet game for most of the back line, except for Will Penasini, who had 133 metres. He comfortably led the way in the back 5 there. Forwards quite productive. Reg 123 metres, Tuolangi 132, Barlaw 122, Cartwright 165, and Madison 104. Pretty good comeback game for Ryan Madison too. He's been out of action for a while. Thought he had a pretty handy game there. Bryce Cartwright very good as well. So a lot of good productive parts of the team across the board there. But as we mentioned before, sort of coming unstuck in that final quarter of play, as we saw with the Bulldogs as well. So don't know if it's fitness, if it's just getting a little bit frazzled, trying to chase points, or trying to seal a lead. And credit to the Roosters again; they're a very very talented team. And we knew it was going to take a lot to beat them, hence our preview podcast installing them as pretty firm favourites, even if we tip the Eels of our hearts.
Yeah. Look, there are some stats worth noting, as you said there, the performances of Bryce Cartwright. I thought he was outstanding. The front rowers in RCG and Junior Paulo really got the job done. I thought tonight it was certainly in their run meters it was some of the better performances that we've seen from the two of them. I think for some time. You gave a mention there to the return of Ryan Madison. I thought it took him a little while just to find his feet in the game, but once he did, as you said, he was very, very solid. But look, I think there's something to be said in the run meters for the outside backs, apart from Will Penasini, who really was causing havoc with every carry that he was making. He was swatting away the Roosters defenders. He just seemed to be finding space. He couldn't quite burst out into the clear, but he was really causing all sorts of dramas for the Roosters on the Roosters' left side defence. But then we look at the run meters from the back five, and it's not really big, is it? I mean, Gutho's we don't know if these are the final stats, but we're working with these numbers at the moment. 91 run meters for Gutho, 82 for Sean Russell, 31 for Dejan Arce, 86 for Blaze Talangi. So, it was really left to the forwards to do a lot of the hard work. And we saw at different times when the Eels were trying to ruck it out that unfortunately our outside backs in their carries were really being dominated by the Roosters' defence. Strange old game, mate. Like, as I said, I thought it was going to be a 40, 50-point thrashing. I mean, I was literally sitting there having to accept what it was going to be like tonight. It just felt like there was no way that the Eels were going to get back into the game. The fact that they were able to reach a 2-point lead during the second half, it was, I suppose, you have to give credit to the team, the way that they kept scrapping and kept fighting to gain the ascendancy. The Roosters, we spoke about this in the pre-game, the Roosters are the sort of team that will give you opportunities. And they certainly did that. I thought the Roosters left some tries out there in the first half as well. They seemed to butcher some line breaks, not being able to finish them off when I thought tries were imminent, and seemed to turn over a lot of possession. I think they're like, I think the second worst team in the comp, aren't they, with completions or errors? I seem to recall that being a stat. So we were talking about how the Eels just had to keep in there and hang in there because opportunities would likely present themselves. It's just it didn't feel that was going to be that way in that first 20 minutes of the game. But, mate, what have we got to do? What have we got to do to be able to start winning games again when we put ourselves into positions of winning like we did last week and we did again this week and just couldn't get the job done? I spoke to you before we started recording, and I felt that the turning point in the game was when the Eels were on the attack 10 metres out from the Roosters line. We had a 2-point lead. There'd been an offload. It was a bit scrappy, but Mitch Moses ended up coming up with possession, rifled a pass out to his left. It looked like it was going to Sean Lane. Sean Lane pulled out of catching it, and it basically then hit the ground because he didn't take it. It wasn't finding anyone. And then Kilmer and Dejan just couldn't deal with a bouncing ball. The ball was knocked on. And I think from memory, the Roosters went downfield from that point. Did they score a try after that one? Without watching a replay, I can't recall off the top of my head, but for mine, there was a real momentum shift when that happened. And I think it sort of seemed to coincide as well with just after that when Brendan Hands was replaced by Joey Lussick.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought as well there that we stopped asking some of the questions that we were asking before that. So what about you? Where did you see things starting to fall apart for us?
Yeah, I think there's definitely maybe a link there to that sequence of play where Moses went to the left edge and Sean Lane opted out trying to catch that cutout pass. I do feel that in general we sort of were, it wasn't rudderless because that's way too harsh a way to describe it, but we sort of maybe lacked a bit of intent through that set too. Prior to that, our offloads have been really aggressive and with intent, and the ball movement was crisp, and that's why you saw Will Pennicini get that look where he could beat Junior Ponga with the sort of, not in a way, but like a bit of a hip check, and then flick the ball out to Blaise Talangi. And I don't think Will was afforded those opportunities after that. And maybe the Roosters made a defensive adjustment too. I couldn't tell on first watching of the game, but it felt like we got a little bit. And, for those that will stick through and listen to what we're talking with Michael Buettner with, he mentioned the importance of the crispness of your passing and the timing of your passing, and how, such a fundamental skill allows attacks to look better in the defense. And I think we saw the difference in that in this game between when Parramatta was scoring the tries. They were on point, in sync, on time, and the Roosters really struggled to go, in alignment defensively with them. And then when the Eels got a little bit of a sync there, it allowed the Roosters to start swarming and making defensive plays. So, yeah, I think that was a turning point. But I think, again, it also speaks to a wider issue with the team, or a greater issue with the team that we saw against Canterbury. And to an extent, we saw it against Cronulla too, where the Sharks did make a bit of a comeback in that period on the back of their big forwards on the interchange. But the Eels are able to wrest back momentum in that particular contest. So, I don't know. It's not a problem that you can really fix at this point, I don't think, because it's some combination of fitness and personnel and maybe even coaching plans. But it is absolutely backbreaking sort of stuff. And we saw the Roosters being good enough to, win the arm wrestle from that point and, generate a couple of tries down that left edge. I think it was Daniel Tupou and then Angus Crichton scoring the two eventual match-winning or combination match-winning tries there. And yeah, it's frustrating because, like you said, at one point you're thinking, well, how much is it going to be? 40, 50, 60? Because traditionally the Roosters get off to a hot start against us, they tend to bury us. And then we came all the way back to taking that 2-point lead, only to... And it wasn't like the wheels fell off the cart. Like, we were still fighting out there. We didn't roll over. But we just didn't have the same oomph the way we're playing the game in that final quarter of play.
Yeah. Do you see that, Pat? Is it possible there's a lack of self-belief or a lack of confidence in the team?
Yeah, I don't. I'd be shocked if it wasn't the case. 60s is probably the best way of phrasing it. We know that confidence in any team sport, but especially one that is as open and flaunt as rugby league, it's liquid gold. And when you have it and you can, semi-bottle it, you see teams go on these big runs and start winning games they have no right to win. Playing brands of football that are seemingly beyond the personnel in a squad. And the reverse is true too. When you're short on confidence, stuff that is your bread and butter, or should be your bread and butter, it doesn't work the way it should. And the Eels in this game had that passage of play where they had the win in their sails and looked confident, but it's like a little drop of water in the desert, isn't it? Like, they got a taste of it and they took it as far as they could, but because they're not a team that is confident on a macro sense, on a large scale, when the one sequence goes against them and you're pointing towards that Sean Lane non-catch, and that might end up being the correct point. So let's talk about that one there. Suddenly it dries up and you're back to being parched, and the Roosters are too good a team to not be confident against.
Now, I'm not too sure how this looked on the broadcast, but one of the things that I noted from up in the stands tonight was it seemed that the Roosters had a different game plan in the second half to what they did in the first half. The first half, I thought they were looking to be as expansive as they possibly could be. The second half, it looked like they targeted in behind the Parramatta ruck, or just the side of the ruck, and really kept going to that well over and over and over again. And I thought that they were starting to get the dividends from that in that period of time as well, where
Luke
we
Keary
seemed to lose momentum.
Tedesco and Keary were a real menace in that regard. Had a number of line breaks there. I think it was Junior Barlow who made – the game was very much still on the line at that point, made an absolutely ridiculous cover tackle to save a certain try, down the right edge near our goal line. So, big shout out to the big fella there. That was it's one of those unfortunate, phenomenal efforts that's not going to get any reward. because we couldn't fight back from that point and claim the victory. But yeah, the Roosters definitely changed gears, changed strategies in the second half 60s. They went from that expansive play, and surprisingly, they did a very poor job of isolating Joey Manu up against Dejan Arce. So maybe they just overfought that one there. But in the second half, they went back behind the ruck, getting Tedesco and Kiri, maybe not as the primary runners, but as the support men to create those opportunities and create a few line breaks. And it did damage to the Parramatta Eels, that's for sure. And we've highlighted that issue around the ruck as one of our real big weaknesses, and it always sucks to see a team exploit it that way.
Yeah, the try that really disappointed me was the one that was scored in the second half by Tupu, the one that got them back in front, because it really felt like there was nothing on, and they were able to manufacture something out of nothing where our defence out wide there just didn't play it smart.
No.
It just it was a try that shouldn't have been scored. It was a pretty soft sort of, it was a soft try to have as that moment where we conceded where we surrendered the lead back to them. So yeah, very, very disappointing, that part there. But you look at tonight, and it might have been before the game, if you had said to me that the Eels are going to, they'll put up a decent effort, they might fall about 10 points short, would I be happy with that? No, look, I wouldn't be happy with that. I'm never happy with a loss. But when we were doing the preview podcast, I said what my fear was, that it was going to get really ugly. And then when it was revealed that we were going with the same backline iteration with Dejan playing inside Sean Russell, and just thinking about how the Bulldogs destroyed us out wide, I really feared what it was going to be. And then when the match started again, I've said it a couple of times already this podcast, I had grave concerns over what was going to happen, how many points were going to be scored. And I guess to an extent, we may have adjusted well. To an extent, they didn't execute as they should have.
I mean, the issue of picking Dejan at centre was twofold, though, wasn't it? Because defensively, he wasn't eviscerated like he was by Stephen Crichton the week before, but offensively, he didn't bring a lot to the table. I think Fox Sports had him down for 30 metres or something like that. And when you're up against the post in the second half, when the Roosters are moving the ball on you and your forwards are fatiguing, that's when you need your backs in the trenches. And he's just not familiar with the role. So Morgan Harper, I think, probably gets you 100 metres today.
Yeah. I'm not sure what his stats were in the New South Wales Cup.
Have to wait till Monday for that one.
Second half. Yeah. Only saw the second half of that game, but he was playing quite solid in that with his carries. But look, we can go on and on about what the Eels roster looks like. We're getting closer to June 30. We have to assume that the Eels have no intention of picking up any extra players, even though there are 3 spots available. It feels like this year is being treated as a lost cause. I felt that was the inevitability when you have a mid-season sacking of the coach. We've spoken about it before, like before BA was sacked, when South sacked their coach. I said to you back then, I am no fan of terminating a coach during the season. I don't think there's much to be achieved in that regard. Now, South might make me eat my words there. They've had 3 wins and a bye over the last few weeks. The Eels have not had that sort of success, and have continued to butcher the opportunities of winning games. So I just feel as if we're going to have a lot of heartache between now and the end of the season, John. I've probably had to come to terms with that fact. I'm not happy about it.
I mean, at this point, the only question is there a piece of cutlery at the end of this heartache, or are the Titans or the Tigers going to out-tank us? And
I gather you're talking about a kitchen implement.
yes, exactly. The
It's
Italian
made
nonnas
from
are always
trees.
wielding one, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I do have a brother who felt the wrath of a wooden spoon when he was younger. So it wasn't restricted to Italian mamas. Now that my parents weren't ones to wield implements as part of their discipline of children. But I think he did get one whack across the backside with a wooden spoon in his childhood. So I am familiar with its uses back in the 60s. So, but yeah, let's hope we don't get a wooden spoon, mate. I mean,
Well, look,
I don't want to think
you,
about that.
you, you remove that you remove that from your periphery. The focus now becomes on what we can salvage for next year. That means looking to the next wave of players that are going to make their debuts, which means, and again, it's difficult because you haven't got a new coach installed. So all this is very much in a state of flux, but we've talked about it. But Charlie Geimer, Matt Arthur, they're the next cabs off the rank. Getting them into the first grade fixture and integrating them into the game day sequencing and what it takes to be an NRL player must be a priority at this point. Because we're talking about getting...
Oh, look, that's me. Yep.
Yeah, we're talking about dummy half position where you mentioned today, Brendan Hands did a good job. But the moment he comes off, Lassie couldn't quite bring the same tempo. And it was part of the reason why the door was open for the Roosters. You don't lose anything by throwing Matt Arthur into that, giving him a chance to be the guy that can be deputy to Brendan Hands.
Well, he's now been recognised by New South Wales selectors in selecting him as the dummy half in the under-19s Origin game. So this is, and no doubt he would be receiving offers from other clubs.
Yeah, and the matter of keeping him for Parramatta is going to be obviously a huge issue given the familial tie there. But you're not keeping him by not playing him. Like that is a very basic tenet here. If you're not playing in first grade, he's not going to stay. And it's not this isn't like I'm saying he's holding us hostage here. This is just here's a player that's ready for this role, not to be the number one dummy half, not to shoulder 80 minutes of NRL football, but to play 15, 20 minutes to Brendan Hands 60, 65 minutes. So we go there, and we've spoken about maybe bringing a bit more mobility to the pack, and Charlie Geimer fits that mold. He's he's not small, but he's a smaller back rower, capable of playing edge and lock. He fits that modern mold of that kind of a back rower, and that in particular now he's at lock forward. He can do a really good job around the middle. So they're the two big ones for me. There's some other stuff too in terms of promotions to reserve grade that I think the Eels need to be kicking the tires on, even without a head coach. We've spoken about the backline crisis. I think someone like Muhammad Al-Madeen probably needs to get at least a cup of coffee at New South Wales Cup now. We need to have these guys starting to progress for season 2025. So even if there is no head coach, these I think are pretty elementary football decisions that can be made without the purview of a new NRL head coach. So that's my priority now if I'm talking about the Parramatta Eels. And like I said, you put the talk of a wooden spoon outside your periphery and you get back to just playing football as tough as you can, as hard as you can, as long as you can, and make sure you're competitive every week. Because that the moment you slip away from being competitive is the moment that you start talking about some serious, like, longer-term issues. And the Eels still have too much talent in their roster for that to be rearing its head, even if there are significant holes in terms of roster balance.
Yeah, so just another name I want to throw up to there, mate, for first grade consideration is Matt Dury, because he's been a consistent performer for the New South Wales Cup team since he's come back from injury. Their surge in form seems to have coincided with his arrival back in the team. He was again very strong in as I said, I only got to see the second half after the podcast appearance in the Leagues Club today. I will look at the footage of the first half over the weekend so that when we have a bit of a chat about it in the news podcast, we can talk about it in a little bit more detail. But that was a 28-20 victory to the Eels over the Roosters in the New South Wales Cup game, and that was again with the Eels missing the key player of Matt Arthur there. So I think they did quite well there. And let's give a shout out to the Jersey Flegg team, who scored a 30-8 victory over the Roosters at Cabramatta today at New Era Stadium. We had the wingers certainly got amongst it today. Bo Newlands got a double, and Mohamed Alamuddin he got his hat trick of tries today. Only 3 conversions to Arpa Twiddle today, so lots of tries there scored. It was a 6 tries to 2 victory to the Eels. You gave Mohammed a shout out and said he's surely pressing for consideration for a New South Wales Cup call up. I would agree with that. His work rate with his runs in yardage I think it's been significant for the Jersey Flegg team. Let's just put this into perspective about the Jersey Flegg team. They lost their first 7 games of the season. They've since won 6 of their last 7. The New South Wales Cup team lost their first 5 games of the season, and they've since won 7 of their next 9. So that's the
confidence to do that for you, won't it? Won't it? I mean,
it will.
Liquid gold, baby. It's just amazing what stringing a few wins back to back can do. Having the right personnel become available due to whether they were injured or playing up a different grade, covering for another team. And both those teams have done very well, considering how drained their resources have been because of issues at the NRL level, and the cascading impact that goes down from there. So well done to Kalo and Rankin for
Judd Rankin. Yep.
For
and
steering their respective teams to where they are on the ladder now. And the Eels are still in the Jersey Flegg. They're still. It looks like they're miles down on the ladder. I think they're in 12th or 11th pending results this week, but they're now just 2 wins back, or maybe even less than 2 wins back from the top 6. And in the New South Wales Cup, they're just kicking the door down now. They are breathing down the backs of the Warriors and Panthers. So really well done.
Yeah, and it's also indicative of the fact that they played without any luck in their matches against the Roosters. Probably only about 5-6 weeks ago, where both lower grades lost that match. We've spoken about the New South Wales Cup just getting hammered 9-1 in the penalties in their loss to the Roosters back then at Wentworth Park. And I also referenced that the Jersey Flegg had all the momentum, were in total control of the game, and then got a really tough call that basically changed the direction of the rest of the match. And they've been able to respond this week with that convincing 30-8 victory, and the New South Wales Cup getting that 28-20 victory. And that was a come from behind, because I think they were down. What was it? Something like 16-4 or
Roosters
something like
had
that.
Scored. Looks like it was 10. I think it was 10-0, and then it was 14 or 16-6. So they did a good job coming back from that.
Yep. Okay, mate. Well, I think we can probably go to a 3-2-1 this week, because look, the Eels did it well enough, and there were enough good performers tonight that I think we might get a little bit of debate about the best 3 on field. As far as our own ratings are concerned. Who gets your 3?
I think, given that he was wreaking havoc down the left edge of the Roosters, probably Bryce is my 3, although Junior was even though his numbers are a little bit down on Bryce's, some of the effort plays from Junior today were phenomenal, and really indicative of a guy that hasn't given up on the season. So I like seeing that from the big man. So I'll go Bryce Free for my best on field.
Well, then I think have you basically telegraphed who's getting you two then?
Yeah, I don't need to be too coy about it. I think there's other guys that had good games too that'll be in the hunt for that 1 point. But June's with that big. He doesn't get the try assist, but the line break assist to Reg was some phenomenal ball playing from a big man. That big tackle he made down the right edge from one of those line breaks from Luke Keary, I think it was. That was almost Payne Hask-esque in terms of the athleticism on display there to make the save. So, yeah, I'll give the big man 2 points.
Yeah, let's finish it off. Who gets you one?
Yeah, a couple of guys here that would be eligible. I thought Will had a pretty good game, but there was one really bad defensive read in the first half that was the Daniel Tupou's first try, where I think I know that we looked short initially from the scrum because we mucked up very bizarrely from scrums today. That's something we didn't talk about, but our numbers were not good there. But we made the move from the inside to get numbers, and he sort of didn't buy into it and sort of overcommitted to support Mitchell Moses, paving the way for the 2-on-1 against Blaze. So I'll dock him a point there and put him in the honourable mentions. For my 1 point then, makes it a bit tough though, doesn't it? Just trying to think, who else could it be? Matto was solid. Actually, you know who I thought had a good game? And I can't see the defensive stats here because Fox Sports haven't got him up here. But given the difference that was there when he was on and off the field, I might go with Brendan Hands by 1 point. I thought this is his third good game out of dummy half now. And he's shouldering a pretty heavy workload. So I'll give the dummy half 1 point.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. I think he's definitely in the running for points.
Another honourable mention, I suppose, Kelma Tuolangi as well, who once he gets the errors out of his game, and I know he got put in a sin bin, but he's looking like a real footballer out there for us.
He's surely going to end up with time on the sideline, isn't he?
It is hard to see him getting any sort of grading that warrants just a fine. That was a dangerous throw of some magnitude, so he's probably going to spend 2 to 3 weeks on the sideline, I would imagine.
Yeah. Now, so maybe the opportunity is there to blood Charlie Geimer or return Matt Dury to the top grade. At some point, John, you have to be able to say to these New South Wales Cup players who are performing consistently well.
Well, one team's winning games and the other isn't. And
yeah, that's right.
You can only shut the door on the players trying to kick the door down for so long till it becomes bad for culture.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. It's you just can't ignore consistently good performances and continue to select players who, there's players who are probably performing a little bit better right now than what they were during the run without Mitch Moses. Certainly in those games where we copped a hiding, there were some players there, and you just thought they can't keep selecting them in first grade. They can't keep holding on to a place. As I said, they're performing a little bit better at the moment, but yeah, there has to come a point where you go, look, this bloke deserves his shot. He's going to get it, and so I think if you do have Kilmer out via suspension, and I know we've got maybe that spot covered with Ryan Madison coming back from injury, but yeah, I think we're getting to the point where it's going to be the opportunity there to select players who have been knocking the door down for most of the season. Okay, so I'm just going to flip the points. So 3 points for me for Junior. I just thought he was outstanding tonight. 2 points for Cardi. He had moments in the game where he was just bamboozling the Roosters' defence. He had them going, shuffling backwards. He had them not knowing whether to come in and try to shut him down or to wait to see what he was going to do with the ball. They just didn't know whether to commit to a tackle or not. The 1 point, look, you mentioned Brendan Hands. I thought he was a very good performer tonight. Will, likewise. Maddo.
Dylan had the Roosters, sitting back and watching him for a good stretch in that second half. Scored that try.
Well, that's where I'm going, mate.
There you go.
That's
good
I
call.
was dancing around all the other players. No, my 1 point is going to Dylan Brown.
Fantastic solo try. Another really nice line break from early in the kickoff set too.
Yes, yeah. So he's been Dylan's been busting his ass all season, and he's been receiving criticism from some segments of the Eels supporter base, and I just don't get it. I really just don't get it, because what he brings to the team, we saw what happened last year when he was out with that long suspension. We struggled as much as what we did without Mitch Moses this year. It was just, he is that important to the team, and that try, he just, he created. There was literally something out of nothing with that try. You mentioned that long line break from just after the kickoff. Really good performance from Dylan Brown. I don't know whether we're sounding like we're accepting this loss and it doesn't hurt, John, but I want to assure the listeners that even though we're talking matter-of-factly about what we saw tonight and we're finding things to be positive about, man, this hurt tonight. Like, it really, really hurt. And it's almost, it feels like I should be angrier, or more upset. I feel myself like there's an acceptance of where things are heading this season. I don't want to feel that way, but there's an element where I do. But yeah, no, I'm really like games like tonight. It almost felt like the inevitable, like there was going to be a loss coming at some point. And I hate feeling that way. I hate going to the game where I get an element of hope that builds up during the game, and then you start to see the loss of momentum, and then all the pessimism in the world kicks in, because, I was turning to the fellas around us and just saying, we're done. And that was, and I think we might have still been 2 points up when I first said it.
It was a similar position to what we saw for Canterbury last week, where, the Eels had the lead, but you could feel the opposition coming. You could hear the footsteps. And on that note, like we said, look, you look at that team, again, put aside the macro roster issues. We've gone about it ad nauseum. We know that this is not a complete roster. There are holes there, that both Brad Arthur and Trent Barrett are shackled by a limited amount of players they can use. Even so, I think it's time for Trent Barrett to look at this team and say, there's some fungible options here. Makatoa, Lussick. Like, right there, you got two guys, a forward and a utility, or a dummy half utility, that you can be bringing in a Geimer or a Dury and an Arthur. It is time to start making progress towards season 2025. And I know it's tough for someone like Barrett, who might not be here as the head coach. You're trying to juggle results now for the best thing for his resume. But, there's also a duty of care to put this club in the best position to succeed long term. And it is time to start making those moves happen, because we know what we get out of those guys, and it's not going to make a difference to next year.
Yeah. And just on that, Sean Lane, is he?
Yeah, he's in the same category. Yeah, absolutely. So right there, that means you can get your Dury, Geimer, and Arthur trio into the team next week. And I know that Jermaine Hopgood wasn't here today as well. He's been rested due to those back issues. And that will now depend on whether he gets picked for Queensland, because that's also another part of the selection equation that could change it. But, it is time. Let's start making some positive moves happen. And, it could be more short-term pain as Geimer and Arthur get used to the pace and the physicality of first grade. But we We literally don't have anything to lose. Like, who cares about going last this year? I know it'll sting, but who really cares if it means we're going to be better for next year? And we need every step ahead that we can get now, because we are so far behind on recruitment because we don't have a head coach. You know, whoever ends up being the head coach needs to have an inside running on getting us some reinforcements next year, because otherwise it's going to be tough. But that's beyond our control right now, so we focus on the guys like Arthur and Geimer. And, you know, I don't know if Brock Parker's part of the equation. It might be too soon to put him into the first grade mix, but, you know, as he starts to get more and more starting reps in Cup, that's going to put him in a better stead as well. So these are all the little, you know, wheels that need to be in motion for the Parramatta Eels moving forwards.
Now, before we wrap up, mate, can you find the stinger that you cannot be serious? Because I've got it. I very much wanted to draw the attention to something from tonight that I thought was just, I cannot let the podcast go without speaking about it.
60s, you ask and I will deliver.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
Okay, John, we've gone on ad nauseum about the recorded chant. Right?
This one, yeah, I feel where you're going for this one. I like it.
Mate, they had to be taking the piss tonight. And I'll say this really directly to the Parramatta Eels Football Club. Stop it. Like tonight, there was one sequence of play where they played the recorded chant. I'm not exaggerating. It must have gone for about 90 seconds, because I think we had a set restart in it. The Eels were attacking the line, and it just went on and on and on and on. Give it a rest. Enough. Supporters out there don't like it. They don't like being told how to chant or when to chant. Now, they've introduced this drum sound to try to get the crowd to chant. I can live with that. I cannot live with a recorded chant. And it is getting over the top. And tonight, it was played that many times. Do not do that to us. Stop insulting us. Stop taking the piss with us. I am really, really frustrated with that. And I can't express it any stronger. They cannot be serious, mate. They cannot be serious. And I hate to end on such an angry note, but I was getting so frustrated during the match with that. It treats the crowd like idiots. Stop treating us like idiots. Stop treating us like robots. It's not adding to the atmosphere. It's detracting from it. And you are completely destroying what was a great chant, mate. It was a great chant. It's what the John English song was based on, because anyone that was part of the Eels supporters for like up until they started using this recorded chant, that you know what it was like. It was an organic thing. The chant would happen at the right time in the games. It didn't need someone with a button up in the stadium somewhere pressing that button to activate the recorded chant. We don't need it. People hate it.
I think you got some powerful support here, mate. I've got a soundbite from a prolific celebrity in the US that agrees with you.
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
He agrees with you there. Stop the can chants.
Okay. That's probably enough for me tonight.
No, it is definitely a bone for anyone sitting in the stands and just hearing these. It's so phony having it piped in like that. And like you said, the crowd, you know, I know that rugby league is the working man and women's sport, but they're not idiots. They know when to cheer. They know when to rally for the team and start the chant. They don't need to be told when seriously, the most awkward moments are to start the para chant. So yeah, I agree. Put it away. Let the crowd decide when they're going to cheer.
And here's the thing: when they stop that chant, there's no one chanting. right? Because they're not responding to it. And as I said tonight, man, like it had to have gone on for about 9. I was like, are you going to stop this at some point? This is crazy. I mean, it must have been that they thought the players needed it. I'll tell you what, if the players need a recorded chant, we're in bigger trouble than I thought. Yeah.
We got 99
I
problems,
have
but
I have to finish up.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, mate, I think that brings us to the end of this. Stick around because we have our chat with Michael Buettner recorded live in Paraleagues tonight. You'll even get an idea about what time it was happening because he referenced the score on the board.
Warriors jumping out to an early lead.
Warriors, yeah.
He got
the
that.
Warriors jumped out.
Mick was having a
lead, yep.
miserable weekend tipping right up to that game. He tipped Melbourne and was ruining the Warriors jumping out to a hot start, but he got that one right. So well done to him there.
Yeah. So, but just for now, thank you again for everyone who came to Paraleagues tonight and to listen to our chat with Michael Buettner. We really appreciate that. Really appreciate Paraleagues, the home of the Eels, having us there on match days. Thanks as well also to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, always there for us, have been there almost since the start. So thanks again to Greg and the team there. And for now, it's over to Michael Buettner.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels. We are the Cumberland Throw. We are a website that is all things Parramatta Eels. We're here every home game to talk to you about the matches, either before the game as a preview or after the game as a reaction. And tonight, we are lucky enough to have a special guest with us. He's player number 503. 263 first grade games, 129 with Para. He's earned City, New South Wales and Australian jerseys. Scored 96 tries, 77 goals, 272 points for the Eels. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael Buettner.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry to disturb your dinner.
Now, Michael, I like looking for a bit of trivia, and maybe it's an indication of how I spend my time, but I was wondering if you know off the top of your head where you sit on the list of Eels all-time point scorers.
It probably wouldn't be high, I can't imagine.
Would you believe you're in the top 20?
No, I wouldn't believe that, but it's nice to know. That's
You actually sit 18th.
18th, okay.
And you sit just behind Ray Price, who had 280 points that he scored, and just ahead of Eric Growth Jr.
Okay, well, I'll take that. That's pretty good. Pretty good. I got to say, it's funny because when I first started playing with Parramatta, I wasn't a goal kicker for my junior team, but for some reason they gave me the kicking duties at various stages throughout the first couple of years of my first couple of seasons of my career, and I think they quickly realised that they needed to take that off me. So there was other kickers that come along. So I don't think my kicking percentage was overly great.
I can't remember. Were you a toe poker? Or?
No, I wasn't around the corner, but I might as well have been a toe poker because either way was useless anyway.
Round 15 in the NRL sees the Parramatta Eels taking on the Sydney Roosters, and it just so happens that you made your first grade debut against the Tricolours back in '92. Obviously, a debut is an important milestone for any player, but what do you remember about that day?
Probably most that I was obviously very nervous, probably well and truly out of my depth in terms of being in that position. I was only 18 years of age. I had just got back the year before from the Australian Schoolboys Tour, and it was probably the last thing I expected. And it come on the back of Peter Sterling doing his shoulder the week before and retiring. So my claim to fame is I replaced Peter Sterling.
We see a lot of, obviously, young kids debuting in rugby league. You debuted at 18. I suppose my follow-up question is, when did it click for you in terms of age, in terms of experience?
Look, I played 4 years at Parramatta before I went to North Sydney, and I've got to say, physically, I was nowhere near where I needed to be. I think skill got me through. I think My speed helped and probably my size as well at the time. But ultimately, it probably took until I got to North Sydney to realise what it took to be a first grader. And I actually, when I signed with North Sydney to go there, I didn't expect to be starting in first grade. I felt that I needed to prove myself, despite the fact that I'd played some 80-odd games as a first grader. I still felt that I needed to prove myself. And I went about doing that during that pre-season, and fortunately things went well, and the rest is history.
Was it, and just on that, was it a very different pre-season that you experienced at North compared to what you experienced at Parramatta?
I think the big difference was the calibre of player that was at North Sydney at the time. The likes of Gary Larson, Billy Moore, Greg Florimo, Jason Taylor, Matt Sears. You can rattle off a whole lot of names there. And when I come into first grade at Parramatta, we were definitely an older club with the likes of, Paul Dunn, Paul Nobby Clark, Bert was still playing, Brett Kenny was still playing. So we had a lot of older players. Mark Laurie was still around. So there was a lot of older players that provided that experience. But I didn't feel that we probably had the quality at that time. And then, the results reflected that. And that's not, nothing against the players that were there. And I was one of them. But we just didn't have the quality and the cattle to be really, really competitive. We had our moments at various stages throughout the 4-year period, but we just didn't have the cattle there to be a real premiership contender.
Now, during those early years at Parramatta, you spent most of your time at centre. You just flicked to 5'8" just before you left. Then spent most of your time at 5'8" at North. All up, you played 143 games at centre and 109 games at 5'8". For you, what was your preferred position?
I think it come down to who I was playing with. And my time at North Sydney, I had a halfback by the name of Jason Taylor, who his game suited my game because I was a running 5'8". He would go to the line. He'd look to hit the short runner, some of those big forwards like a David Fairley, a Gary Larson, a Billy Moore, a Greg Florimo, look to hit them and I'd sweep around the back. So that style suited my game. The beauty also at North Sydney was we had myself, Ben Eichen, Greg Florimo, who could rotate in all two positions. So it was just a case of whatever the coach felt at the time suited the team, but also suited the opposition in which we were playing.
Well, I guess the other point of that is that the coach had options. Perhaps we could talk about this later, but probably at the moment the Eels aren't blessed with a lot of options in terms of backline choices.
I'd probably suggest that the options may be there, but they're not experienced options. And unfortunately for Parramatta at the moment, that's the real concern. Like we've got the likes of Arcee, we've got Blaze Talangi, who are very young and inexperienced. And when you take out the likes of a Mitchell Moses and a Gutherson, who between them have probably got over 450 first grade games, that's a lot of knowledge. That's a lot of experience. That's a lot of understanding of the game. And the only way these guys are going to learn that is by having those guys around, first of all, but also by playing first grade on a regular basis. And, I went through the same thing. When I first came into grade, a win was a big achievement. All right, there were few and far between, but we just had to make the most of it. So from that end, I think they've got a lot of talent, and that's clear when they've got the ball in the hand. The hardest part about first grade is adapting and understanding your role defensively and how important that is within the team structure, and being physically strong enough and mentally strong enough, physically strong enough game after game, but mentally strong enough week after week after week throughout the endures of the entire season.
And so it's built on that concept of inexperience, perhaps hamstringing the Eels out in the three-quarter line. We often see centre hailed as the most difficult and technical position to defend at in the back line across the entire team. If Dejan Arcee and Blaze Talangi and the other options there are struggling,
What makes it such a difficult position to defend in?
Well, you get a lot of the action running at, if you look at the defensive line, you've got winger, centre, 5'8", and then the back row. So usually a lot of the plays are being run at the 5'8", and in most instances the 5'8" or the halfback are getting drawn into that big forward who's running that straight line. So you've got an outside back or the fullback sweeping around. You've got to make a genuine decision, right? And do you go in? Do you hold and wait for your halves mate to slide and get across? And we, what we saw in Origin with a guy like Suolihi, who decided to come in and got it all wrong on Reece Walsh, right? So that's why it becomes a really technical position. It's one of those positions where you panic because you have got people running at you at speed, and you've got to make a split-second decision. For me, I think the safest option and one of the, the real bits of advice I would give to those young guys would be to have faith on the guys inside you, to allow them the chance to get out, all right, and to blame them if they don't get there. Yeah. Right? My theory in defence, if you get beat on the outside, it's your responsibility. If you get beat on the inside, I've got to look at my mate inside and see what he hasn't done to cover my ass.
We were speaking to Muggo a bit over a month ago. Obviously, he's got plenty of experience with the coaching side of things, and he was talking about triggers that he would identify when he was defending. Was there something like that for you, where you look at the shape of the opposition on that sweep with the fullback, and then you make your jam or hold decision based on that?
Look, I think that the hardest thing is, like, you can look at the numbers and see where they are. Teams are coming your way, right? So communication is a big part of that. It's also numbering up and knowing who you've got. But also, and again, the reliance is on this third man in, right? His ability and his understanding to not get caught in by going in too far. He actually needs to probably be a little bit closer to the back rower so that he's actually going out. That's his first action, not to get caught on the inside shoulder, but to get caught on the outside shoulder, because, hey, a couple of things happen. You get caught on the outside shoulder, it's an obstruction, first of all. If that guy happens to get through, you're going in the right direction, right? As soon as you turn your shoulder in, with a play like Reece Walsh, or any fullback for that matter, they're going out there, you are no chance of getting back. That's when it becomes such a tough decision for the outside backs there, the 3 and the 4, to determine which way they should go.
That's a great technical breakdown. Thanks for that, Mick.
Absolutely. Now, just turning the attention to the halves, the Eels really struggled during the absence of Mitch Moses. First question specifically about Moses. What qualities does he bring to the Eels side that make him so difficult to replace?
Well, I think the first and foremost is experience. He's played 200, 250 plus first grade game. That in itself, that's 10, 12 years of experience right there. So that is hard to replace, right? And, you hear, the experts talk about the fact that, you need to play 50 games of first grade before you're regarded as a genuine first grader. So he's done that 5 times over, 4 or 5 times over. Right, that's the biggest thing for me at the moment, the experience. B, his composure, his kicking game, he's very hard to replace. He's got one of the biggest boots in the game, and his game management. He just seems to have that control throughout the game and manage, the direction in which Parramatta go. Plus the other thing, and again, this is probably, it's hard to put a actual amount or a figure on this, but it's the impact and the influence he has and the confidence he brings his teammates. That is almost invaluable, right? So outside of that, you take away an Andrew Johns out of a Newcastle team. They're a different team. You take away Cherry Evans out of Queensland, out of Manly. They're a completely different team, right? Now you can look at someone like Nathan Cleary at Penrith and you go, okay, if you take him out, why are they still so good? Well, the fact of the matter is they've got systems in place. They've got, you look at their junior level, the junior grades, the second grade and the under 21s or whatever it may be, whatever grade, the second and third grade at the moment, they won those competitions, right? So everybody's under the same system. So it's just a case of I step in, I know that you're going to do your role, you're going to do your role, my role is this, and I'll be able to cover it. I don't need to be as good as Nathan Cleary, but what I need to do is direct the side, kick when I need to, and make my tackles, right? Because Luai will cover, Yo will lift up, Dylan Edwards will do more. It is just a really smart process that they have in place there, and a great system.
One of the major parts of the equation of Mitchell Moses being out for so long was that a lot of responsibility fell onto the shoulders of Dylan Brown. What did you see from Dylan in the 2 or so months that Mitch was out in terms of his development?
I think Dylan did extremely well throughout that period, because it's not a part of his game that he's had to focus on, because he's had Mitchell there for so long. So it was a learning period, and I think if we look in another 20 games or another half a season next year, you'll see Dylan Brown develop and progress from what he got out of that. So we just need to be patient with that as Parramatta supporters and fans, because ultimately it's not just going to come. You don't become, a game general. You don't manage the game it'd be like someone trying to come in and replace Peter Sterling. It's just not going to happen. We've been looking for that for the last 40 years, right? It's just not going to happen. It just takes experience, time, and we just need to allow that as supporters. And I know we're, very much a results-based industry, but it's very hard. You just need to be a little bit patient with it.
Now, Michael, we've talked a bit about some of these players today, but I want to flick that centre and 5'8" question back to your days. Who was the best centre and 5'8" that you played against?
You know what? It's a really tough question.
I only ask the tough ones.
No. And mate, because I look at some of the calibre of players that I had the opportunity to play against, and I played in an era where there were so many great players, right? And if I'm to look at the Canberra side, I can go with Laurie Daly, Mount Meninga, okay? Or I can go with Laurie Daly and Ruben Wiki on the other side, right? Because he was a centre at the time. If I go to Brisbane, you go with Kevin Walters, Steve Renouf, right? If I go to the Roosters, you go with Brad Fittler, and I don't know, they had plenty of good centres there at the time, right? It was just an era. If I go to Manly, you go to Cliffy Lyons and you go to, Terry Hill, right? It was just an era in which Penrith had Steve Carter, Ryan Girdler, right? They just keep coming to me at the moment, but it was just an era in which, I only got the opportunity to play, one rep game at New South Wales and Australian level. The only thing stopping me from playing more was ability, right? But ultimately, I look at that and I go, I'm not ashamed of that, or I'm not embarrassed, because I look at the players that were there ahead of me, and they are some of the greats of the game. So for me, I go, you know what? I'm not ashamed of that. I'm actually really proud that I managed to get that far, and I would have loved to have played more. But again, there's no shame in the players that were ahead of me. They were absolutely amazing.
Well, I guess it's like players who actually get to play a first grade game for a start, they can feel proud, because that funnel from juniors all the way up, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower, so that it's really the elite that get to a certain level. Once you start talking about representative football, that's a pretty narrow funnel.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, again, I could rattle off all those names, and, we're talking about, Mount Meninga's and an immortal. We got, those guys that Terry Hill played, 19, 20 Origin games and for his country. Steve Renouf was one of the great centres. Wayne Bennett spoke about Hammer's try the other night. He said there's only a few tries that I remember in my coaching career. That'll be one of them, and the other one was Steve Renouf's try in the grand final. So, there's so many great players that have played the game, and I'm fortunate that I got the opportunity to play against them, compete against them, and maybe at times get on top of them.
Yep.
It's been a tough season for the Parramatta Eels, no sugarcoating that, and it culminated in the parting of ways of head coach Brad Arthur. And there's a little bit of a parallel to your playing career there, because when you were at North Sydney, Peter Louis was replaced mid-season. So I've got a twofold question for you. First of all, How difficult is it for an interim coach, usually an assistant coach, to step in and take over at the helm? And then for the players, what sort of disruptions do you guys go through when you're playing under a new coach in the same season?
Yeah, look, it's interesting because obviously the new coach comes in or the interim coach comes in and he's got different ideas and concepts. He also knows that he's probably every chance of just being there for the season, right? So unless he's got the ability to turn them around really quickly and get success. And I think Jason Taylor did that here when he came over as interim coach.
Correct.
He picked up a couple of seasons on the back of that based on the fact that he did have success. It's not an easy situation for any of the coaching staff, and it's certainly not an easy situation for the playing group. But what I will say is the playing group just need to get on with it, all right? Because there's no point dwelling on it, right? A, pride is at stake. B, your own career and where you're heading, right? And you can't afford, your time is limited in the game. So you can't afford to waste 20 games of a season because the coach has been moved on. Some of those decisions are beyond your control. And in fact, most of those decisions are beyond your control as a player. So you've just got to go about your business and put in the effort. And that's where it comes from for me.
That's sage and pragmatic advice. I like it.
Absolutely. Now, any NRL coaching gig is going to be something that coaches aspire to take on, all the upcoming coaches or coaches without a gig. What would it be about the Parramatta gig that should be a job that potential coaches would aspire to getting?
They're a great club, right? And they've been a great club for a very, very long time, all right? They've got great supporters who rock up each and every week and give their all and ensure that, they get behind their team. They're financially, they're in a good position. When we're talking about on the field, I think there's a lot of exciting players coming through for Parramatta. And I touched on a couple of those early on. Arcee and Blaze Talagi, Sean Russell, right? I think they've got some ability there. I think we probably need a little bit of addition to our forward pack, right? I think there's a couple of old legs there that we're running on at the moment, and I think we just need to see a revamp or somebody. We've seen that with the lock. Is it the young kid?
Jermaine Hopgood?
Hopgood, Hopgood, who I think is a great player. He's obviously gone on to play for Queensland with the Origin. But, I think there's a lot of good things here at this club that are real positives. And you know what? We've got to bear in mind, it was only 2 years ago we were in a grand final, right? In fact, 18 months ago, we were in a grand final. So things can't be that bad here. It's just about, I believe, and the game is so close now, right? There's not much in it. And, we can look at this round, for example. We've probably seen 4 upsets so far.
Tipping has been a
Tipping's
nightmare.
been an absolute nightmare. So on any given day, any team can beat anybody, and you just need to be on your game. And this is the difference between the good clubs and the good teams and those that struggle, is that consistency. And that, we're looking at the Melbourne Storm walk out now. They're a club that have that consistency. The Roosters are actually a club that are very consistent, right, and very potent at the moment. So we need to be on our game tonight. And for me, it's also about players going into games and thinking about, what they can be doing or how they can be improving or getting the best out of themselves, but also getting the best out of their teammate. And if you go down with that mentality and work extremely hard for each other, and we've seen it with the Bulldogs this year, what they've been able to do and create there, a culture within their club now that, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Whether it's this year or whether it's next year and beyond, they've got some really strong leaders in there that are leading the way.
Yeah, what we saw last week from them was really a lot of effort plays, a lot of focus. And when they went down to 12 men, you could see Crichton gathering them all and getting their minds right on the job then and there. Like, we're going to get through this. You know
what? They've probably done that drill at training 1,000 times over, right?
Yeah.
And he's a great leader, Stephen Crichton. He's done an amazing job at that club. And it's interesting, I heard during the week people talk about, we may not have never seen that leadership from Stephen Crichton when he was at Penrith.
This was the making of him this year. Yeah.
But he probably still had that leadership qualities there. It's just that it was secondary to Cleary and Yo.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
and we don't know what happens in the training paddock and the leadership and the role that he played in shaping that team. I started to see it, I reckon, a couple of years ago, and how his confidence grew and how people thrived and reacted to what he was doing. Right, he's a big moment player. So that's what we need at our club. We need really strong leaders who can provide that guidance and steer us in the right direction. And it may not be the obvious ones. It may be the silent assassin, so to speak, who comes along and does that and does their talking by their actions, right, and ensures as a club we're heading in the right direction.
And strong leaders is the perfect segue for my next question, because you gave us a stellar list of your contemporaries at centre and 5'8". But in terms of coaching, who was the best coach that you played under?
I was very fortunate. I played under a lot of very, very good coaches, but the best coach for me, and no shame in saying this, was Brian Smith, by far. I come back in 2001. I'd played, this was my 10th season of NRL. At that point in your career, you don't learn how to tackle, you don't learn how to pass the ball, you don't learn how to catch, because it's expected you know how to do that. But I learned all those things. And I know it sounds stupid and ridiculous that after 10 years, he took things back to the basics and he made you good at them, right? And when you're good at the basics, suddenly the harder things become easier. And I see, and you know what, it's funny, you're talking about the Bulldogs earlier on. They're not doing anything fancy, the Bulldogs, right? They're actually just making the game really simple. And I think at times we can look at structures, we can look at the way teams go about things, and they can overcomplicate it. But if you break the game down, it's really simple. You run harder than your opposition, you're going to make more meters, right? You tackle harder, right, and put them under pressure, and you control the ball. That's about as hard as it needs to be. Then you build from that, right? You get momentum. If they're tackling more than you are, there's a fair chance you're actually going to make them more fatigued.
That's something we talk about, isn't it, Craig? In that while there are beautifully complex movements across the back line in the modern game, when you distill it, rugby league is a simple game, and winning those simple moments that you're talking about there goes so far towards winning or losing a game.
Again, I'll just refer to the fact that some of those special moments, those silky backline movements, they look so simple, they make it look easy. That's because they've done it 1,000 times over.
Yep.
That's because their skill set is so refined that that catch, that pass, and it's very subtle, but the ball is in front. It's not, I'm not turning my back to catch it here. It's there, so that I can tip it on. Right, so it just flows, which sometimes you just go, how did the defense get it so wrong? They didn't. The attack just got it so right, and it looked simple. And with my coaching, I always talk about execution. And if you nail the execution, the plays will work, right? If you don't nail it, it makes it look really difficult. But when you get it right, when you get the defense to do exactly what you want them to do, it just happens.
Now, turning to tonight's game, the Roosters are absolutely loaded with talent. Right across the park. What sort of game plan do you see them throwing at the Eels tonight?
Well, one thing I do know, over the last 4 or 5 weeks, they've scored plenty of points. So I'm expecting them to throw the ball around and use that skill and the talent they have out wide. They've got, Tedesco out the back there, who's clearly, I believe, got a point to prove after, Origin 1, and probably likelihood that he won't be selected for game 2. Right, you've got some outside backs there, and probably the best centre in the game in Joseph Manu, who's probably also, when he plays there, the best fullback in the game. Yeah. Who's got so much ability. Their forward pack is big, strong, so our forwards need to be really competitive and really need to hold that middle. Otherwise, they will run rampant. And unfortunately, at various times throughout the year, we've seen the Parramatta defence crumble and not be as resilient as they need to be. So this is imperative tonight that they actually stand up and be really strong in that department.
You mentioned some superbly talented players there, Tedesco, Manu. They've got Dom Young on that right wing too. What matchup are you looking at for the Parramatta Eels as the most exciting on that contest between the two teams?
Look, obviously the two fullbacks go without saying, Gutherson and Tedesco. Completely different styles, but both very energetic and both very much an integral part of their team. For me, I think it's really significant. You know, people are talking about this being a dress rehearsal or the make or break for Moses in relation to the Origin selection. I think it's an important game for him. I don't think it necessarily matters about the result, but I think the way in which he manages the game
process, yeah,
is really going to be important. I think he proved that last week, and it got sloppy, not on him, but it got sloppy as a team performance towards the back end of the game, and we just ran out of legs, right? And we can talk about, again, simple parts of the game. Canterbury will be one of the fittest sides in the competition, probably behind Penrith.
Yeah, you look at that defensive record and it speaks towards the fitness.
Right, they are one of the fittest teams in the competition. So at the back end of games, right, they've got it there. They're still up and about and going hard. And, you know, what the magic potion is for that, it's done 6 months ago in pre-season, and it's blood, sweat and tears. And there's no hiding from it. You can't mistake that for anything else but hard work.
So, Michael, can the Eels do it tonight?
Oh, there's no reason why they can't. No reason why they can't. You know, they've got to turn around what happened last week. It was a close loss to the Bulldogs, who don't offer a lot in terms of, who don't give you a lot when it comes to how strong their defence is. The Roosters can be like that, but haven't shown that much this year. So they're not the Roosters of 3 or 4 years ago defensively, but I think they've got some attacking prowess about them that we haven't seen for a while from the Roosters. So that gives them confidence in terms of their attacking ability. So we need to get our defensive structure in place. I have no doubt that Arcee will be put under a massive test tonight because he got found out last week, and this will be the biggest challenge for him. And I'm sure he's done plenty of work throughout the week leading up to this game to ensure that he's ready to go.
You mentioned how hard tipping has been this week, this round 15. Is there another upset brewing on the cards for the Parramatta Eels tonight?
Yes, I hope so. But I was just about to say here, it's 6-0 to the Warriors, and I tipped Melbourne. So seriously, I cannot pull a trick at the moment. Hopefully the Storm can get themselves up. But yeah, I can see Parramatta doing it. There's no reason why they can't. And I'm sure all these fans here will agree that the Mighty Eels won't get the job done tonight.
There we go.
Yes, there we go.
Now, just moving on to getting you to put your old North Sydney hat on. The Bears have come up in chats about being one of the expansion teams moving forward. Do you think they are a genuine chance of coming back into the NRL?
Look, I hope so. You know, I've heard Peter V'landys talk, and he's talked favourably when he's talking about the Bears. That gives me a lot of confidence because V'landys is a shaker and a mover, and I think he doesn't make claims or would say things that weren't going to eventuate. So for me, there is no doubt that we'll be getting an 18th team. There's no doubt we'll be getting a 19th team. In which order that comes, I don't know. But, you know, what I do know is that the Bears bring with them history. They're a club that, you know, a foundation club, 1908, they were around. They've continued in the New South Wales Cup. They've continued in the junior rep program. So they've got systems in place there at the moment. They've got a very strong supporter base who will certainly get behind and support the Bears no matter where they're located. I think ultimately Bear supporters just want to see the red and black back. And I'm one of those in the sense, and if it happens to be over in Perth, then so be it. And they bring a couple of games over to North Sydney Oval. I think each and every time they come to North Sydney Oval, it will become like the Leichhardt Oval of North Sydney. And that's how we'll see it. We need to preserve that, bring that back, and hopefully, get the red and black back in.
It'll be the ninth wonder of the world.
Yes, it would be. It would be. Is that behind Combank?
That's it.
And that's probably a great way to go into the main reason why you think the Bears should come back, because there's going to be a lot of factors. Nostalgia obviously playing a part of it for a lot of fans, but why are the Bears so iconic to the NRL? Why should they be back in the mix?
Look, I think a couple of reasons. A, foundation club. B, it's 25 years, and the way in which they had to merge with Manly, is just based on the fact that they looked to build a stadium up on the Central Coast. It was delayed because of weather, and that basically was the death nail for the mighty Bears. So, I was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to play in the last game for the Bears, and I would love to see them back in the competition. Like I said earlier, there's stats that indicate that there's some 200,000 supporters out there who follow the Bears in some way, shape or form. Now, they're not members as such, but they are people that will support and get behind the Bears. So that in itself gives you a really good foundation. You add to that the fact that they're going to a new area, and if it happens to be Perth, then there's so many possibilities over there, or positives, from the game's perspective. The first one being commercially, there's a lot of it's financially viable over there. Secondly, is from a TV perspective, the time difference is a no-brainer. So from that end, I think there's a couple of big reasons why the Bears should be in terms of the game expanding, and obviously, like I said, that history there, that you can't replace that. You cannot replace it. We've seen it. Look, we've seen it with the West Tigers and how hard they've found it, and they've been around for 25 years. Right, they've really struggled to escape that West Balmain mentality. This will be a whole new franchise going over there, and these kids in Perth will get behind the red and black.
And they were everyone's second favourite team as well.
They certainly were. Mate, you know what? You look at the Bears, we're probably the best side in the 90s.
Yeah.
Sorry, the best club in the 90s not to win a premiership.
Yep.
Right? There was probably four occasions where we were in the preliminary final. I think most years we're in the semi-finals throughout the 90s. So it was a very strong club with a lot of quality players, and people remember that and would love to see that back again.
Matt Sears being run down in preliminary final.
Yeah, Darren Albert. People remember 97 for Darren Albert scoring the try, but he was responsible for getting the Newcastle Knights into the grand final
Into
because
the
of that
big
tackle.
dance. Yep.
Right, you talk about Matt Sears. Matt Sears running down Brett Mullins. In 94, he chased and turned and chased. One of the great tackles by a fullback in finals football.
So, in looking at the expansion, it seems like PNG is going to be the 18th franchise. It seems to be that's the word that's coming out. You played up in PNG in your test match for Australia. From the bit of experience you've had with PNG, can they make it a success being an NRL franchise and competing on a weekly basis?
Look, I think it's one of the only countries where rugby league is the national sport. So that's a big tick. Now, obviously, they have a lot of issues over there politically and what have you. Do I think it'll be a success? I think what we've seen with the PNG side being in the Queensland Cup and what they've brought to the game, there is certainly room there for it to prosper. What that looks like in terms of homegrown, I don't know. I'm not sure how that will look. I'm not sure if we do have a PNG side that their big superstar has been born yet, because it may take some time for that player to come through. Yeah. They may have been born, but they're still a little boy, right, learning the game. As long as they've got the systems in place, and I think still have that connection with the mainland in terms of Australia, then I think it can be a real positive there.
Mick, you've been phenomenally generous with your time tonight. So just a couple of quick questions about Origin before we let you go. We see our Origin 2's on the horizon, teams being picked end of this round. We spoke to Steve Ell about this before the Cronulla game. He was on our pre-game show. We saw Jermaine Hopgood and Future Eel in future Eel in
Zach
the Dragons,
Lomax.
Zach Lomax, stumbling over there, making their debuts in the cauldron of State of Origin. How daunting is it to make your debut at that sort of level of football?
Look, it's probably the pinnacle. Like Origin is, every year it's 3 games, and you know that's as hard as it's going to get. Right? If you happen to play for your country and get that opportunity, it may not happen every year. So this is 3 games where everybody involved in rugby league is so engaged, and the borders are divided. Right? It's as simple as it is. There's no greater passion than Queensland versus New South Wales. You could have Australia versus New Zealand. You could have, we've probably seen it, something similar where it's Tonga versus Samoa, right? But in terms of our game and where it's at, that is probably the pinnacle for players. So to go into that cauldron and for both of them to play the way they did is a great performance. And they certainly weren't out of their depth, that's for sure. And they'll certainly be there come game 2.
Yeah, 40 years and strong, and nothing goes as hard as state against state, mate against mate.
Yeah, 100%.
And what would you see as any likely changes that New South Wales are going to make?
I think there's some obvious ones. I think Sualihi, obviously, they're going to have to bring a centre. Latrell Mitchell's name's been thrown up. And one thing about Latrell Mitchell, I think he's at his best when he's challenged, right? If he gets selected for New South Wales game 1, he probably doesn't lift right over the last 2 games the way he has for South Sydney. You know why? Because he's got a point to prove. He's saying to Madge, you know what? You should have picked me game 1, right? The other thing about Latrell Mitchell is he instills fear in the opposition, okay? So that, for a centre, is a good thing, okay? He is going to instill fear. He's the X factor. He's got so much to his game. I think Dylan Edwards comes in for Tedesco. Again, I think that's a no-brainer. He was going to be selected if it wasn't for the quad injury. So, and again, it's not to say that Tedesco had a bad game, but I think Dylan Edwards, it's his time. The halfback is the question mark. Now, you could look at it 2 ways. Nico Hines had to play for 72 minutes with 12 men. That's a tough situation for any halfback. I don't care who you are. So, does he get another opportunity? I think, from what I saw on Thursday night as well, his confidence is down somewhat. I really believe that. Defensively, especially in that first 25 minutes, he struggled. His kicking game improved, etc. But I just think his confidence is down. Mitchell Moses could be a replacement there. And I think we need to look at our bench and what that may look like in terms of, I'm not sure how 3 back rowers fit into your rotation, right? Our back rowers, the likes of Liam Martin, the likes of McGuinness, when you look at Olakau'atu, Hudson Young, and Yeo, they're all 80-minute players, right? And we're talking about Cam Murray coming in. He will probably come in somewhere. So where do you fit all these players in? That's the big question. So I'm not sure that rotation suited us. I love what Spencer Leniu did. Yes. In the forwards, I thought he was outstanding. But, yeah, it's a really tough balance to get there. I think Buettner should be on the bench somewhere. I think, again, he can cover a whole lot of positions, in particular out wide if we need him.
Yeah, those tricky positions that get you in trouble if there is an injury in the game. No, fantastic wrap-up of State of Origin 2. Mick, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know you're going to be busy for the rest of the day. You shared with us some fantastic insight on the centre position and some great and stories and experiences across the game. Ladies and gentlemen, Mick Buettner, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.